Ensign Williams' striking style is heavily influenced by geometric constructivism. Lieutenant Wright has effectively fused the incongruities of the surrealists with the irrationality of Dadaism, and Data finds Picard's painting interesting. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton, who's also very interesting.
That was excellent job, Ryan. Good job.
Thank you. My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 3, Episode 14, A Matter of Perspective, written by Ed Zuckerman. Isn't that like a 90210 character? Andrea Zuckerman. Directed by Cliff Bowl. Everybody knows and loves Cliff Bowl. This was February 10th, 1990. Where were you, and how are you today, Sirach Lofton?
I'm doing great. It's Cargo Bay Cliff Bowl. That was the new nickname for it. But no, when did this episode come out?
February 10th, 1990.
Yeah. Okay. I'm doing great.
Mm-hmm. So Cliff Bowl, we know and we love him. He's cool. He's great. Ed Zuckerman. I clicked on him right before we were going to record just to kind of look around and poke around if he'd done anything before. Because when I first watched this episode just now, I was thinking this has a similar feel to a Melinda Snodgrass episode. You know, a little more techie than she likes to go. She likes to go more into legalities. This one, it was kind of a fusion of techie talky stuff that was tough for my brain to capture. I'm like, is this a converter? Is it a generator? I don't even know what we're talking about. But then also fused in with like the courtroom and psychological stuff. And everybody at home, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening in, please leave us a 5-star rating and a nice review. We'd really appreciate it. So what do you think of this courtroom stuff, Sirach?
Well, I will say that if Melinda Snodgrass were to write this episode, I think she would have a different twist on her perspective, because a lot of the things that she does, even though she does have that court background, is thematically. She takes certain principles and makes those the heart of the show, like we saw with that episode she did, A Measure of a Man. Is that with Data?
Right.
Yeah. And so what she did with that episode was take the principle of human rights and attribute it to whether Data is qualified to have these kind of human rights that, are granted to everybody. And does the fact that he's an android exempt him from certain kind of privileges that are extended as human right privileges? So I think that this episode was lacking that kind of moral compass to guide it. And if it had grounded itself in some level of morality, where as the audience I'm fighting whether I'm on one side of the thing or the other, then it would make me kind of question some aspect of whatever legality that they were trying to raise in this particular instance. For example, they could have talked about Starfleet rights versus the rights of this planet. And that could have been a central theme. Like, well, in our, we have extradition rights, we have the right to interrogate, we have the right to. And Starfleet saying, well, no, because you saw that Picard took the position that no, you're not going to extradite him to wherever you want to go. Or you're not going to interrogate him to wherever you want to interrogate him. You're going to do it here. We're going to have it. So they touched and brushed upon who has the legal authority to conduct and what it is that needs to be done and how it was going to proceed. But that could have been a point of contention right there. It could have been something that we, discuss. Could have been something that's argued between Starfleet's, higher ups and this planet's delegates and representatives. So that could have been more of a central theme in this episode.
I completely agree with that. Um, and not just because you said something very eloquent and I want to jump on the bandwagon, but that's mostly it. Is that no, I totally agree that Melinda Snodgrass, she's examining humanity. She's examining, the theme of the episode is the rights of the individual or psychology of humanity. There's this kind of human play. Whereas this episode touched on it. It touched on Riker's rights. It touched on the rights of the Federation versus the rights or of Starfleet versus the rights of the planet they're visiting. It touched on those things. It covered them. I found those to be very interesting. But then it moved on. That was not the theme. If Melinda had written this, that would be the theme. It would be the theme of Riker's rights, even though it would be about his rights on a different planet. Do we follow the rights that are laid upon him from Starfleet or on the planet, whatever. But this one was much more of focusing on just the mystery. This was a mystery episode. And it was actually real quick. This is what it made me think of. A Matter of Perspective made me think of this cool graphic. I'll pull it up right now. What you have is a number on the ground and two dorks pointing at it. One of them is standing on one side and says, "That's a 9." And the other one is standing on the other side saying, "That's a 6." And that is a matter of perspective, right? He's not lying. He's not wrong. He's not lying. He's not wrong. But they are seeing two different things based on their perspective. And I think it's a perfect illustration for humans and a lot of things. And it was certainly the case with this episode, because in Riker's memory, he's like, "Hey bro, no man, she came on to me. I was like, no way, I respect you and the doctor too much. Please put your clothing back on. What are you doing?" Like, he was just like,
yeah, right.
or what a poor guy. She was all over him, and he was like, "No way, my heart belongs to Deanna Troy, and you're married. I would never." And then in her memory, she's like, "This lech was groping me, and he was all over me." And then the assistant was like, "And then my boss knocked him out with a right hook." It was killing me, man. But that's the matter of perspective, I guess.
Yeah, and so for that reason, it was very, on the surface what it was. It wasn't There wasn't much of a mystery there for me in watching this episode. You know, I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to have a good use of Counselor Troy. I was like, yes, finally,
Totally.
Counselor. I was like,
But
Troy's
then
gonna.
what a cop out. She's like, "Everybody's telling the truth. They just have a different perspective. Then why do we have you here? You're literally
Seriously.
right here in a courtroom, and you're like,
Yes.
everybody's telling the truth." I mean, obviously it does work out that they were all kind of telling the truth for the most part, but she could have at least added, like, she's telling the truth, but she's unsure about what she says, or she does have some hesitation, or
Yeah.
Riker's
She's
telling the truth.
protecting her feelings. She's embellishing
Yeah.
something that we can, as the audience, can obviously tell that she's embellishing. That they're both embellishing. And there would be some tell, like, I don't believe she's being 100% truthful, Captain. Some cue, but she's being almost useless as the rest of the story. And I was rubbing my hands, thinking, "Oh, this is it. This is where Troy uses her
Her
uses her
moment to
power."
shine. It's a
Yes,
Troy episode. Here we go, Troy, go get him. And she goes, "Both sides are telling the truth. Da 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 da. Hey."
yeah, yeah. So it was. I don't know. It was in that way. It was really a little. It was just lackluster for like an interesting plot line for me. I didn't expect it, so I had to find other things to keep me entertained, and those things were the music, for example. Uh,
The opening music.
yes, the
For me, it was
opening
like in the
music.
first scene, I was like, what is this? It
Yeah.
was different than any episode I've ever heard. That first scene music. I was like, what am I listening
Yes.
to?
Yes. And then when the chief inspector comes to charge Riker with murder, they played this eerie music that was like, just letting you know this is the moment. And so you just realize how well they use music to play with your emotions when you're watching these episodes, or
Mhm.
to signal to the brain, okay, this is when you're supposed to be suspense. Okay, this is where you get to let your guard down. Okay, this is where the action is picking up. And it's just in the background, but it does initiate those kind of responses in your brain, like, okay, I get it. This is the eerie moment. This is the dun dun dun.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I liked it, but it was weird. I couldn't place it. It didn't sound like any episode we've heard
The
before.
opening music was different than anything
Hmm.
we've heard before. Almost like a completely different score came
Yeah.
to do this.
And then I
Yes, I
started
agree
thinking,
with
did
that.
they change, musicians or composers, or what's the situation here? Um, Another thing I want to point out very quickly is the writer of this episode, Ed Zuckerman, and please let us know in the comments below. Wasn't that a 90210 character? Andrea Zuckerman. Sounds like that's a person. Um, so I checked to see if he'd done any other episodes, because he certainly had a different style of anybody I've watched. And it turns
Mhm.
out, no, this is the only episode of Star Trek he's ever written, but he's got a long, illustrious career in shows like Street Justice, Miami Vice, JAG, The Agency, Law and Order again, Blue Bloods, Law and Order again, Law and Order again. Okay, so we definitely see what this guy's bread and butter. He does these this is why they hired him. They hired him probably
Yeah.
specifically for this episode, or maybe he pitched it and they figured, he's the right guy to write it. I don't know, but clearly he belongs in that world, and they borrowed him for a minute to do that kind of world episode into Star Trek. It was a mystery, kind of.
It makes perfect sense. In my notes, I wrote down murder mystery. I
Mm-hmm.
wrote down murder she wrote / Matlock. I wrote down CSI and Law and Order.
Mm-hmm.
These kinds of formulaic shows that they just superimposed onto Star Trek. So it was obvious to me that this was a Law and Order type of episode, uh, just in Star Trek Starfleet uniform. Um, but it could have been done better, because the science fiction element wasn't fully extrapolated by Mr. Zuckerman. I feel like he could have, he just instead of just using aliens to get the point across that this is a science fiction show, you could actually bring in some arguments, some debates about legalities in these kinds of situations. I think it would make it good for the audience. They could have brought in, for example, the treaty that this planet had with the Federation, and what was negotiated under that treaty, and certain rules of engagement for procedures like this particular incident could have been ironed out. I would have been interested in hearing that debate. I would have
Mm-hmm.
been interested in hearing that argument, where maybe this guy comes in with the team trying to forcefully extract Riker, and this kind of debate about this chess move debate about diplomacy, and whose rights are supersede whose.
Right, right, totally. And it seems like this episode, it really was focused. Like they said, we want to focus on, as the title says, a matter of perspective. We want it to be, the episode was about very specifically one person's memory versus another person's memory versus another person's memory of the same thing, and then how to extrapolate the answer to um, a mystery, which is funny because their testimonials didn't actually lead us to the answer. It was Geordi and Data and Wesley figuring out this anomaly that was going on. That's what solved it. So all these testimonials actually didn't progress the at least not on purpose. Inadvertently, it created that, radiation ray or something like that, which is what led the engineering team to solve the mystery. But
Yeah.
but that's just luck that happened. Otherwise, if that didn't happen, they would have just said, okay, well, there are three different perspectives, including the assistant who wasn't even there, where they're like, well, she wasn't even there. Yeah, but let's hear what she has to say. And she's like, I bet that this happened. And they're like, okay, that's evidence. I was like, that is scary law right there, dude. You
That's
just
sketchy. Yeah.
somebody that's just like, I'll bet you this is what happened, Your Honor. She said she bets this is what would happen. So
A
I think
friend told her that this is what might have happened if they were there.
she has a gut feeling that that doctor knocked out Riker. Let's
Yeah.
lock that in.
Well, you know, um, given that there was not much depth to the storyline, there were other things that I had to look for, like I said, with the music, with the
Mhm.
performances. And so what I would
And there was no B plot.
no B plot.
I mean, the B
Yeah.
plot was
So
kind of maybe the engineering team working on stuff, but that wasn't. Usually we have, Data's learning how to play pool, or
right.
Troy is teaching Wesley how to not be too much of a dork or something, or, who knows? But we got none of that. They're just like, no, this is so good that we want the whole episode. Anyway, I interrupted you. What were you saying?
No, no, you're right there. And it was like, no, I want something else. The episode in itself opened with an awkward note, right? Because here you have this. It's always weird to have a classroom full
Oh,
of
yeah.
people painting a nude model.
Actually, it did have that. But is that even a B plot? It was one scene. It was just,
No, yeah, no, I wouldn't put that as B plot. I would put it as awkward. It was an awkward moment to me that
hmm.
because when's the last time you've seen that? Do they still even do that where a naked person sitting on a stool with a bunch of fruit around them? Like, is that still done to
I don't
this
know.
day?
I'm picturing Enterprise. Enterprise has done some pretty sketchy stuff, but no, yeah. To your point, not really. No.
Yeah, like do you know anybody that's done that? I don't know of anybody that's actually had that life experience and say, yeah, I was taking this art class and I was drawing this naked person.
I know a
it's a rare.
couple, and I would be
Does it happen like that?
petrified. Yeah, I would not
So
sit there for 4 hours. I don't even know how they
yeah,
can do that without moving.
it's crazy to me, and uh, it's like I don't even know why. Like that seems like an old thing to do. It doesn't seem like a it's very dated. It's like one of the classical arts type of things. It's part of the old style, I would say, of learning to some degree or another. I don't see it as something that's 400 years ago from now. They're still doing that. I think that the way art would change, the way art has changed, it's not traditional in that sense anymore.
Right, and I think that demonstrates that Picard does like old stuff. Um, like books. He likes to read books still, like
Shakespeare and
actual
yeah,
books, rather than on
yeah,
his pad. He's an
yeah.
archaeologist. Things like that. Yeah, Shakespeare. So I guess maybe that's just kind of a nod to that. But then when Data just completely destroys him, that was hilarious. He had those nice things to say about the one, nice things to say about the
Yeah.
other. And then the look that he gives Picard when Picard says, oh, and what about mine, Commander Data? Go ahead, heap your praise on mine, Commander Data. And then
Yeah.
Data like gives him a look. He's like he was kind of scared to say it, but also like
Yeah.
disgusted by what he saw. And he's like,
Well, he
well,
was actually
okay.
psychoanalyzing him too. It was revealing almost too much about Picard's inner, psyche.
Yeah.
The way
Yeah.
Data was explaining
And then he says, if I can be a further assistant, he's like, no, thank you, Data.
that.
Like, that's enough. It's going to take me weeks to recover from this.
So, and you know why they write that in there, because that, again, that's another like writer's trope of a matter of perspective, right? Oh, this is literally a matter of perspective.
It's a great point.
You see it that way, I see it this way. You do cubism, I do realism, you're abstract. And so it's the same thing. We're looking at the same thing, but we have this variety of viewpoints in the end when we come with our final artwork. So I get why it was used, particularly for this kind of explanation into the larger a story, which is going to unfold in front of us. This was kind of the intro into it, like, oh, let's see how you look at it. How do you perceive things?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it makes sense
Absolutely.
why they did it. It makes sense why they did it. It just was seeing Picard being uncomfortable and unsure of himself was a moment of fragility that you rarely see from Picard. So I actually like that.
You know, there was something too that I noticed. I think I noticed it for the first time in this episode. So I want to check that out. It has to do with somebody's rank. I feel like somebody's rank changed, or I just noticed it in this episode. So everybody at home, what I'm trying to say is stick around to find out what that is, because I know there's no way you're going to leave. I gotta find out what this one thing Ryan just noticed is. But we will take a very quick break, and we'll be right back on the seventh rule.